Story 1. Her messages were hidden in the Notes app. I used to think trust was automatic. You either had it or you didn't. Now I know trust is a habit, a rhythm, something you do every day without realizing it. For 3 years, I trusted my girlfriend, Emily, without question. We lived together in a small apartment above a florist shop, the kind of place where the smell of roses drifted in through the vents every morning. We shared rent, groceries, playlists, inside jokes. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. She worked in marketing, and I worked nights as a hotel manager. Our schedules were opposite, which made every small overlap feel special. I'd come home around 6 in the morning, and she'd still be half asleep, hair tangled, mumbling something about coffee. It was simple, safe. Until the night she left her laptop open. It wasn't snooping. Not really. I was grabbing a file off our shared drive. Her laptop was open, glowing faintly in the dark. A Word doc blinked on screen, titled Notes. Nothing strange about that. But when I clicked it, out of habit, not suspicion, I saw lines of text stacked neatly like journal entries. Only they weren't journal entries. They were conversations. Short lines, initials, fragments, and dates beside them. It took me a moment to realize what I was reading. That the Notes document wasn't notes at all. It was where she'd been pasting deleted text messages. I scrolled. My stomach dropped. I missed last weekend. He doesn't know, right? God, you're amazing when you're nervous. There were hearts, half-deleted names. The kind of intimacy that doesn't belong to anyone but two people who know exactly what they're doing. I remember the sound of the refrigerator humming, the light from the screen painting the apartment blue. I remember how still everything felt. I closed the laptop gently, like that would keep it from being real. For 3 days, I said nothing. We ate dinner, watched a show, slept side by side. She laughed at something on her phone, and I stared at her profile. The same face that used to make me feel lucky just to be in the same room. I kept trying to convince myself there was another explanation. Maybe it was an old document. Maybe she was helping a friend. Maybe. But the mind doesn't let you rest when it already knows the truth. On the 4th night, I asked her, plain and calm, "What's the notes file on your laptop?" She froze. Not dramatically, just a small, barely visible pause before she smiled. "What notes file?" I told her. The title, the lines, the initials. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. She tried to laugh it off, said it was nothing, said she used it to write story ideas, said I must have misunderstood. But the next morning, the file was gone. Deleted. Recycle bin emptied. That's when it clicked for me. The deletion wasn't panic. It was experience. She'd done this before. I found the full picture a week later. She'd been seeing someone from work. A client, technically. Someone she met on a campaign 6 months earlier. They'd been careful. New numbers, private accounts, messages deleted every night, receipts hidden in drafts. When I confronted her again, she didn't deny it. She just cried quietly and said she didn't know why she did it. That it wasn't about me. That she loved me, but she'd gotten lost in the attention. The thrill of being wanted by someone new. That's the part people don't tell you about cheating. It's not always cinematic. It's not shouting or tears or grand betrayals. Sometimes it's just a long, tired silence. Two people realizing the map they were using doesn't line up with where they actually are. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just felt old, like we'd both been walking in circles. She moved out 3 weeks later. Left behind a half-empty bottle of her favorite shampoo, a cardigan that still smelled like her perfume, and a mug that said, "Good things grow here." For months afterward, I'd catch myself smelling the air outside the florist shop and thinking of her laugh. But then I'd remember the glow of that laptop screen, the way she said, "What notes file?" and smiled like she could still lie her way out of it. That's when I realized trust isn't automatic. It's a choice. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is choose not to give it back. The next story is a little different. about a man who learned the truth in a way he never expected. But we'll get to that in a moment. Hey friends, welcome back to SpiderFish, your quiet corner of the internet where we take a step back from the noise, drift through a few stories, and maybe untangle some of the knots people leave behind. Tonight's stories come from the softer edges of relationships, the kind that don't always end cleanly, the kind that start with love and end somewhere no one meant to go. We'll be talking about trust, betrayal, and the quiet shock of realizing someone you know better than anyone can still surprise you. If you're listening while you study, build, or drift off to sleep, don't worry about catching every word. Just let the stories play. They'll wait for you when you circle back. Story 2. My dog's GPS showed me she was cheating. I found out she was cheating because of my dog. Not because of some dramatic phone call, not because of lipstick on a shirt or a random stranger's message, but because of a tiny metal tag I clipped to my dog's collar months ago. A GPS tracker I bought after she wandered off once during a thunderstorm. My dog's name is Clover. She's a mutt, the kind of mix that makes people stop in the street and ask what breed she is, and I always have to say, just a good one. Clover doesn't like storms, doesn't like loud noises, and doesn't like being alone. So when I started working longer shifts at the warehouse, my girlfriend Jess offered to take her on walks during the day. It made sense. Jess worked from home. She said it was a nice break between meetings. The first few months were fine. Clover seemed happy. Jess would send photos from the park, little videos of Clover chasing sticks or lying on the grass with her tongue out. I'd scroll through them at lunch and think, man, I'm lucky. A great girlfriend, a happy dog, a simple life. But then the photos slowed down. At first, I thought she just got busy. Work picks up, things slip. It happens. Except Clover's tracker app kept sending notifications, movement patterns, a map of where she'd been. I didn't check it much. I never really had a reason to. But one day, during a late lunch break, I opened it. Clover's usual walks traced the same route. Around the neighborhood, down the greenway, then back home. But this one showed something different. The map started normal, then curved away, out toward the old part of town, across the river, to an apartment complex I didn't recognize. I zoomed in, thinking maybe she'd gotten lost, but the tracker stayed still there for nearly 2 hours. Then it moved again, slowly, back home. It was strange enough to notice, but not enough to accuse anyone of anything, so I said nothing. A few days later, it happened again. Same pattern, same location. The app labeled it automatically as a frequent visit. That's when I felt it, that small, hollow tug in the gut. Suspicion, the quiet kind, the kind you try to smother with logic before it grows teeth. I told myself she was maybe visiting a friend. Maybe Clover liked someone's yard out there. I told myself it didn't matter, but suspicion doesn't care about logic. It waits. So I started checking the app every few days. The same address popped up again and again, sometimes mid-morning, sometimes after lunch, always at the same building, always for about 2 hours. It felt like a pattern, and I hated that it did. I hated that I was starting to count how long my girlfriend spent walking my dog. One afternoon, I asked her casually where she usually went on her walks. She said, the park. I asked which one. She said the one near the library. I nodded, smiled. Didn't mention that the tracker never once pinged near the library. That night, when she was in the shower, I looked at her phone sitting on the counter. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. I told myself I trusted her. I told myself people who start digging usually find things they can't handle. So I walked away. But once the thought settles in, it never leaves. The next day, Clover and Jess left for their usual walk. I waited 20 minutes, opened the tracker app, and saw the little dot moving across the map. Same route, same bridge, same building. I grabbed my keys and followed. I didn't have a plan. I just wanted the truth, no matter what it was. It was a 20-minute drive. The complex was new, tall, quiet, all glass and fake wood paneling. I parked across the street, pretending to scroll my phone while my heart pounded so hard I could hear it. Clover's signal was steady, inside one of the middle units. I waited. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. Then I saw her. Jess walked out the front door with Clover trotting beside her, tail wagging. Clover looked happy to see me, but Jess froze. Her mouth opened a little, like she'd just realized she'd left the stove on. She said my name, quiet, almost a whisper, and asked what I was doing there. I said I could ask her the same thing. She stammered, said she'd been visiting a friend, said she forgot to mention it, but I could see the man standing in the doorway behind her, shirt half buttoned, trying not to make eye contact. I didn't say a word to him, didn't need to. Everything was already said. Clover wagged her tail, confused, happy just to see both of us in the same place. Jess started crying. The silent, shaking kind, where you can't tell if it's guilt or panic. She said she never meant for it to happen. She said it started small. Coffee after a meeting, one bad decision, then another. She said she was lonely while I worked nights, that she didn't want to lose me, that she didn't know how to stop. I listened, but it all sounded like radio static. I took Clover's leash, thanked the man for taking such good care of my dog, and left. On the drive home, Clover fell asleep in the back seat. I remember watching her in the rearview mirror, the way her chest rose and fell, the small noises she made when she dreamed. She looked peaceful. It hit me then that I was jealous of my own dog. Jealous that she could forget things so easily. I didn't yell. I didn't even text Jess afterward. The next morning, she was gone. Half the closet empty, her key on the counter. The apartment smelled faintly like her shampoo, like oranges and something warm. I sat on the couch with Clover's head in my lap and stared at the space she used to fill. It's strange how quickly normal can disappear. How one little metal tag, meant to keep a dog safe, can unravel an entire life. Sometimes people say, ignorance is bliss, but I don't believe that anymore. I think ignorance is just a short vacation before the truth shows up at your door. Now, every time I clip that GPS tag to Clover's collar, I think about trust, about how fragile it is, how it doesn't break in one clean snap. It frays little by little until there's nothing left holding it together. Clover doesn't care. She still loves her walks. She still wags her tail like nothing ever happened. And maybe that's the lesson. Dogs forgive. People remember. Story 3. I never thought I'd be a cheater. I never thought I'd be the one to cheat. That phrase sounds rehearsed now, like something everyone says when they're trying to make sense of what they did. But it's true. If you'd asked me a few years ago, I would have sworn up and down that I wasn't that kind of person. I was raised on loyalty. My parents split when I was 12 because my father had an affair. And I remember the way my mother cried in the kitchen like she was trying not to wake the house. I remember thinking, I'll never make someone feel like that. And then, somehow, I did. It started small, the way these things always do. Not fireworks, just a quiet drift. My girlfriend, Nina, and I had been together for almost 4 years. We'd met in college, shared an apartment, shared plans. We talked about marriage in that casual way people do when they're too young to know how serious it sounds. But over time, the rhythm changed. She started working long hours at a law firm, and I took a job in IT support that had me up at odd hours. We stopped eating dinner together. We stopped falling asleep at the same time. Our lives became parallel lines that never crossed. And somewhere in that quiet space, I met her. Claire. Claire worked in the same building as me, on the floor above. She wasn't spectacular in the way that makes you stop and stare. She was subtle, with this dry humor that felt like a secret handshake. We started talking during coffee breaks. Just small things at first. Clients, projects, weather. Then it became jokes. Then it became stories. Then, one day, I caught myself checking the time, waiting for her to appear at the coffee machine, realizing that my pulse sped up when she smiled. I didn't think it was a problem. I told myself, everyone enjoys a little harmless flirting. Everyone enjoys being seen. But I started noticing the difference. How easily I laughed with Claire, and how quiet I was with Nina. It wasn't that I loved Nina less. It was that I'd forgotten how to talk to her. Love had turned into routine, and routine had turned into silence. The first time I cheated wasn't planned. It wasn't even something that felt real while it was happening. We were both staying late for a system update. The office was empty, the fluorescent lights humming. She offered me a granola bar. I offered her a terrible playlist. One of those nights where laughter feels like permission. And then she kissed me. Soft, hesitant, like she was asking a question I didn't answer. I kissed her back, knowing exactly what I was doing, and feeling my conscience split clean down the middle. It was quick, forgettable in detail, unforgettable in meaning. When I got home, Nina was asleep on the couch, laptop open, TV still playing. I remember standing there, looking at her, and feeling this wave of guilt so heavy it almost made me sick. I told myself it was just a mistake. I told myself it would never happen again. But guilt doesn't fade. It reshapes itself into justification. Weeks turned into months. I saw Claire almost every day. We didn't talk about what we were doing. We didn't define it. We didn't even say we liked each other. We just existed in that space between boundaries, where everything feels like it could still be called harmless if you don't look too closely. Nina and I grew further apart. I told myself it was her distance, her long hours, her stress. I told myself that if she'd just noticed me more, I wouldn't have drifted. But the truth is uglier than that. I'd already decided what I wanted. I just didn't have the courage to say it out loud. Claire made me feel seen again, and I mistook that for love. It ended when Nina found an email I forgot to delete. Not a confession, just a detail. A lunch meeting that didn't exist. A timestamp that didn't line up. She asked me about it, calm but steady, the way people do when they already know the answer. I lied, badly. She looked at me for a long time, then said, "You don't even sound like you anymore." That hit harder than any shout could have, because she was right. I'd become someone else, someone who could smile and lie in the same breath. She didn't cry. She just packed a bag and left for her sisters. She texted me later that night to say I could keep the apartment until the lease was up. That was it. 4 years boiled down to one sentence. Claire tried to reach out a few times after that, but every message just felt like a reminder. I didn't answer. I didn't blame her. It wasn't her fault, not entirely. I was the one who opened the door, who crossed the line, who pretended it didn't matter. People like to think cheating is about sex, or excitement, or escape. But for me, it was about silence. About not knowing how to speak up when something was breaking. About choosing the easy lie over the hard truth. And when I finally had the truth, when Nina walked out and the apartment went quiet, I realized that silence was all I had left. It's been 2 years now. I don't talk to either of them. I still think about Nina sometimes, especially when I pass that little coffee shop where we used to sit on Sundays and argue about which dog we'd get someday. I think about Claire too, and how easily we mistook loneliness for connection. But mostly, I think about that night in the office. How small the decision felt at the time, how enormous it looks now. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that cheating doesn't start with betrayal. It starts with neglect. With the little things you stop doing. The texts you don't send, the words you don't say, the effort you stop making. And by the time you realize what's missing, you've already built the space for someone else to fill. Sometimes people ask if I'd ever tell Nina I'm sorry. The truth is, I don't think sorry fixes anything. Sorry just marks the moment you finally see the damage you've done. I think about her smile, the way she used to fall asleep with her hand over mine, and I know that the version of me she loved doesn't exist anymore. And maybe that's the real punishment, not losing her, but losing the version of myself that deserved her. Story 4. I found out he was cheating because of pizza. I caught my boyfriend cheating because of a pizza. That sounds ridiculous, I know, but it's true. We'd been dating for a little over a year, long enough for routines to feel safe, long enough for my keys to hang on the same hook as his. His name was Luke. We met at a trivia night, the kind where they play old songs between rounds and everyone's pretending not to care about winning. He'd answered a question about obscure movie directors, smiled at me like he'd just passed a secret test, and that was it. We clicked easily. He was funny in a self-deprecating way, the kind of guy who'd trip on a sidewalk crack and laugh about it before you could ask if he was okay. He made me feel light. We spent weekends cooking together, or to be honest, ordering food and pretending we'd cooked it. That's what made what happened so strange. Because the thing that ruined us started with something as simple as dinner. It was a Thursday. I'd had a brutal day at work, the kind where you can't even remember if you ate lunch. On the drive home, I texted him to see if he wanted to order something, and he said he'd already eaten, but I should grab whatever I wanted. Fair enough. I decided on pizza, mostly because it didn't require decisions. I got home, opened the door, and instantly smelled it. Pepperoni, fresh, still warm. There was an open box on the counter, half gone. I laughed and said, "I thought you already ate." And he froze for just a fraction too long before saying, "Oh, yeah, I ordered earlier, but I was starving. I'll grab you another one." It was a simple lie, and if it had ended there, I probably wouldn't have noticed. But the receipt was still stuck to the box. And there, under delivery address, was a name that wasn't mine. At first, I thought it was some kind of error. Maybe they typed in the wrong name when he ordered online. But it wasn't a name I didn't recognize. It was hers. Mara, his ex. I'd never met her, but I'd seen the tagged photos he forgot to delete. They'd broken up a few months before we met. Supposedly amicable, supposedly over, but her name was right there, printed in ink under our address. The pizza place he always ordered from saved old account info automatically, so the name that appeared on the receipt was the name on the app. He'd never changed it. Or maybe he didn't want to. I asked him casually, too casually, if he'd ordered from his phone or his laptop. He said his phone. I asked to see the app. He hesitated. That was the whole story, right there. Not the lie, not the receipt, just that small, stupid pause. He finally handed me the phone, and I saw it immediately. The order history, the same place, same pizza, every week, always listed under her name. I scrolled through the timestamps, and the pattern started forming before my eyes. Friday nights, sometimes Mondays, random lunches on days I was working late. I could see it like a map, the hidden routine inside our normal one. I asked him how long it had been going on, and he said, "It's not what you think," which has to be the most useless sentence ever spoken. I said, "Then what is it?" And he just stood there, eyes flicking between me and the half-eaten pizza on the counter, like he couldn't decide which was the bigger problem. Eventually, he said it started by accident, which to this day makes me laugh when I think about it. How does that even happen? Do you trip and fall into someone's apartment every Thursday? He told me he'd run into her at a coffee shop a few months earlier, that they started talking again, that it wasn't supposed to mean anything. He said it was just nice to feel known by someone who'd already been through his worst phases. That she got him in a way I didn't. That it wasn't physical at first, like that somehow made it noble. But then, when I asked when, not at first, turned into now, he didn't answer. That was the part that hurt more than anything. Not the betrayal itself, but the way he couldn't even own it. He wanted me to be mad enough to leave so he wouldn't have to explain. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just picked up the pizza box, tore the receipt off, and said, "If you wanted to keep ordering under her name, you should have changed the address too." Then I left. I don't even remember where I went that night. Just that I drove with the windows down and the radio off because I couldn't stand hearing anything that made sense. When I came back the next morning, he was gone. Half his stuff missing, the rest stacked neatly by the door. He left a note that said, "You deserve someone who doesn't screw things up." I laughed when I read it. I didn't deserve someone perfect. I just deserved someone who could tell the truth before I had to read it off a pizza box. It's been almost a year since then. I still order from the same place sometimes. Different toppings, different name, and every time the driver hands me the box, I check the receipt just out of habit. It's a small thing, but it reminds me that sometimes the truth doesn't fall from the sky or shout in your face. Sometimes it just arrives in cardboard, warm and ordinary, with your name finally printed where it belongs. Story 5. How I learned to trust again as a victim of cheating. I didn't start trusting again all at once. It came back the way sunlight creeps into a room after a storm. Quietly, in pieces, through the cracks you thought were permanent. The woman who broke me wasn't cruel about it. That's what made it worse in a way. If she'd been loud or heartless, if she'd yelled or slammed doors, I could have built a clean wall of anger and hidden behind it. But she ended it softly. She cheated softly. She apologized softly. Everything about her was quiet, including the way she left. Her name was Leah. We met at a bookstore downtown, the kind with creaky floors, overstuffed shelves, and jazz humming through old speakers. She worked there part-time, I was just browsing, and she laughed when I tried to carry too many books at once. That was the start. We talked, exchanged numbers, started seeing each other after work. She smelled like coffee and dust and paperbacks, like the store itself. She'd tuck her hair behind her ear when she talked, like she was trying to make room for your words. The relationship felt easy at first, real. We'd spend Sundays making breakfast with old records spinning, her humming off key while flipping pancakes, me pretending not to notice when she burned one. We didn't fight much. We didn't have to. She'd smile at me from across a room and it felt like an anchor, something steady to hold on to. For almost 2 years, I thought I'd finally found the version of love that lasts. Then small things started changing. Her phone, once face up on the table, started living face down. She used to read texts out loud. Now she left the room to answer them. She started working late more often. A word that started to sound suspicious just because of how she said it. Late. Always late. At first, I told myself I was paranoid. People get busy. People need space. But there's a specific kind of silence that settles into a home when something's wrong. It's not the peaceful kind. It hums. It fills the air. I'd sit on the couch at night, watching the TV glow against an empty chair, and feel it humming around me. The night I found out wasn't dramatic. There were no big reveals, no shouting, just a small, simple moment that broke the world in half. She'd fallen asleep on the couch with her phone still unlocked beside her. I wasn't looking for anything. I was turning off the lamp, ready to cover her with a blanket. But my thumb brushed the screen, and it lit up. There was a message preview from someone named Eli. It said, "Next time, we won't get caught." I remember the exact sound my heart made in that moment. Not metaphorically, I mean literally. It was like a physical pop, a rush of heat in my chest, followed by this cold numbness that spread outward. I opened the message thread. I read enough to know everything. How long it had been going on, how easily it fit into a schedule, how normal it sounded between them. There were pictures, there were plans, there were jokes about me. I closed the phone and sat there for a long time. The room felt too still, too bright. She shifted in her sleep and mumbled something, my name, I think. And I felt this horrible wave of tenderness. That's the cruelest part of betrayal. The love doesn't stop just because the trust does. It keeps pulsing, confused and wounded, like it hasn't caught up yet. When she woke up the next morning, I didn't confront her right away. I made coffee. We talked about the weather. She kissed my shoulder and asked what I wanted for breakfast. I looked at her and felt like I was looking at two people at once. The woman I knew and the stranger who'd been laughing in someone else's messages. I asked her if she loved me. She said yes. I asked her if she'd been faithful. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. She didn't lie. She just couldn't answer. That was the answer. We broke up quietly. No yelling, no accusations. She said she was sorry in the same tone she used when she forgot to buy milk. I nodded because what else was there to say? She packed slowly, touching every item like it might convince her to stay. When she left, I stood in the doorway watching her walk down the stairs, and it struck me how normal it looked, like any other morning. I waited for some final word, some closure, but all I got was the soft click of the door. The weeks after were strange. The apartment felt like a museum exhibit. Everything in its place, but lifeless. I'd pour 2 cups of coffee by accident. I'd wake up reaching for her out of habit. My friends told me to go out, to meet people, to move on. But I didn't want noise. I wanted quiet, even if it hurt. I'd take long walks at night, down by the river, just listening to the city breathe. I started writing again. Nothing deep, just thoughts, little things I didn't know how to say out loud. Sometimes I'd write about her. Sometimes I'd write about forgiveness, and how unfair it is that we have to give it to people who'll never ask for it. Then, months later, I met someone new. Her name was Iris. She worked at a cafe near my office. The first time we talked, I noticed she didn't rush her sentences. She asked questions and actually listened to the answers. She didn't fill silence, she respected it. I told her about my last relationship one night, not in detail, just enough to explain the way I flinched sometimes when my phone buzzed after midnight. She didn't say anything dramatic, just nodded and said, "That must have made things heavy." That word stuck with me, heavy, because that's exactly what it was. Grief isn't always about loss. Sometimes it's about weight, the weight of remembering how easily something good can disappear. Iris didn't fix me. She didn't try to. We just built something small and careful. We cooked together sometimes, not because it was romantic, but because it was practical. We went for walks. We laughed in quiet places. And one day, without realizing it, I stopped checking the clock when she said she'd be home late. That's how I knew the trust was coming back. Not loudly, not with a speech or an apology, just through the absence of fear. People think healing is about closure, but I don't think that's true anymore. Closure implies something neat, something finished. What really happens is you learn to live alongside the scar. You stop tracing it every day. You stop explaining it. You just accept that it's part of you now. A place where something broke, but also where something new started growing. Sometimes I still think about Leah, not with anger, not with nostalgia, just a kind of quiet curiosity about who she became, whether she ever learned what she was running from. I don't wish her harm. I don't wish her back either. I just wish her peace, because I know how hard it is to find. Now, when I walk home at night and see the lights in the apartment windows flickering on one by one, I think about how many people are inside, trying to forgive or forget, or just keep going. And I think maybe that's all love really is, the attempt, the willingness to try again, even when you know how bad it can hurt. I still believe in love, not the kind that never breaks, the kind that breaks and heals and breaks again and still comes back. Because if there's anything cheating taught me, it's that trust isn't destroyed in a single moment. It's rebuilt in hundreds of small ones. A laugh, a hand on your back. The simple comfort of someone who doesn't make you afraid of the truth. And maybe that's enough. Story 6. How I slowly understood that my partner was cheating. I didn't catch her cheating. I just realized she already had. There's a difference. One is a moment, a shock, a confrontation, a sentence you can quote for the rest of your life. The other is slower. It's like fog filling a room, one breath at a time, until you wake up and can't see the walls anymore. That's what happened with me and Tessa. We'd been together for almost 5 years, living in a third-floor apartment with a cracked balcony and a leaky faucet that sang at night. She was an art teacher. I worked in insurance. She had paint under her nails half the time, and I had spreadsheets in my head. Somehow, it worked. I liked her world because it was messy. She liked mine because it was predictable. We met halfway, her chaos against my structure. The first 2 years were easy. We were that couple people call solid. Friends would roll their eyes when we finished each other's sentences. We built habits, Saturday breakfasts, movie marathons, grocery lists scribbled on the same notepad. It wasn't exciting, but it was steady. And I thought steady was what love grew into once the fireworks faded. Then she started painting late at night again. At first, I loved it. She hadn't done that since college. She used to say inspiration only visited after midnight. But soon it became every night. She'd go quiet after dinner, say she needed to get something down before she lost it. I'd fall asleep to the sound of her brush against canvas and wake up to an empty side of the bed. The paintings started changing too. They used to be abstract, bright, strange colors that looked like sound. But now they were all portraits. Faces I didn't recognize, faces she couldn't quite explain. I'd ask, half joking, who they were, and she'd say, "No one, really. Just practice." But there was something in the eyes, too much familiarity, too much tenderness for no one. One night, I came home early from work. I'd stopped by her classroom to surprise her. Maybe grab dinner, maybe remind her what daylight looked like. She wasn't there. The janitor said she'd left hours ago. I texted her, and she said she was still at school grading projects. I told her I'd bring food. She didn't reply. I drove home, parked, and sat in the car staring at the building lights for a long time before going up. When I walked in, she was on the balcony, laughing into her phone. She didn't see me at first. She looked happy, free even, the kind of smile you only use with someone who's seen you in all your moods. When she turned and saw me, the laughter dropped. She said it was her sister, but her sister never made her smile like that. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The silence between us was enough to build a whole new language. She came inside, set her phone down face down on the counter, and started making excuses about school and deadlines and exhaustion. I nodded. We ate in silence. I didn't ask who it was, because I already knew that asking wouldn't make it untrue. Over the next month, I tried to convince myself I was wrong, that I was just paranoid, that every buzz of her phone wasn't a message waiting to be hidden. But paranoia has a way of proving itself. I started noticing how she'd step out onto the balcony to take calls, how she'd hum when she typed, how she'd stop humming when I walked into the room. I started noticing new perfume on her coat, something floral and expensive. I started noticing she wore lipstick on nights she said she was just grading. One night, she fell asleep with her sketchbook open beside her. I know I shouldn't have, but I looked. There were pages and pages of drawings. Faces again. One man's face, over and over. The same jawline, the same eyes, sometimes smiling, sometimes not. On one page, she'd written his name in the corner, small but deliberate, Mark. I closed the book quietly and sat on the floor beside the bed for a long time, listening to her breathe. It didn't feel like rage, it felt like grief, like I'd already lost something, but was still sitting beside it, pretending it was alive. I wanted to wake her up and ask why. I wanted to understand what I'd done wrong, or what he'd done right. But all I could do was sit there, feeling the night stretch between us like a wall. The next morning, I made coffee for both of us, the way I always did. She came into the kitchen, hair messy, wearing one of my shirts. She kissed my shoulder and said, "You're quiet this morning." I said I was tired. She said she had another long day ahead, then kissed me again and left. That was the last time it felt like we were pretending the same lie. I didn't confront her, not right away. I just started preparing for the truth, quietly. I stopped leaving my things at her place. I stopped talking about the future. I started sleeping on the edge of the bed. When she smiled at me, I smiled back, but there was nothing behind it. I was waiting for her to end it, to say the words and make it official. But she didn't. Maybe she thought I'd never know. Maybe she didn't want to be the villain. It ended one morning over breakfast of all things. She was pouring coffee, and I said her name, just her name. She looked up, and in that moment, she must have seen it in my face. That I knew. There was no anger in me, just exhaustion. She put the pot down, sat across from me, and whispered, "I'm sorry." No explanation, no story, just those two words. I nodded. She cried. I didn't. She moved out a week later. The apartment looked bigger after she left, like the walls had stepped back. I threw away her leftover paint, but I couldn't touch the canvases. They sat in the corner for months, faces turned toward the wall. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of them at night, the man's eyes, her brush strokes, and feel this strange mixture of pain and pride. She'd made something beautiful out of something cruel. It's been 3 years now. I live in a smaller place. No balcony, no art, no echoes. I've dated a little, but slowly. I don't check phones. I don't ask too many questions. I just listen more carefully to the silences. They tell you everything, if you're willing to hear them. Sometimes I still think about her paintings, where they ended up, whether she ever painted over them, or whether she keeps them somewhere private, reminders of a version of herself she outgrew. And sometimes I wonder if she ever misses me. Not the man she cheated on, but the man who still made her coffee every morning, even when he knew. I don't think she does. But that's okay. Some things don't need closure. They just need to end quietly, like a candle burning itself out. Story 7. I knew my best friend was cheating and didn't know what to do. I knew my best friend was cheating, and I didn't stop him. That's the truth I've been circling for almost 2 years now. I didn't tell her. I didn't confront him. I didn't even pretend to be neutral. I just stood there, like a piece of furniture, in the corner of someone else's disaster, watching it unfold. And the worst part is, I think part of me understood why he did it. His name was Daniel. We'd been friends since college, the kind of friendship that feels less like a choice and more like inertia. We met in a freshman philosophy class, bonded over how little either of us understood the readings, and by senior year, we were roommates, finishing each other's grocery lists. He was loud, charming, the kind of guy who never took life seriously, but somehow always landed on his feet. I was quieter, more deliberate. We balanced each other out. When he met Lily, I thought he'd finally grown up. She was warm in a way he wasn't, gentle, steady, grounded. She worked as a nurse and had that kind of soft authority that made you feel safe around her. The first time I saw them together, she was leaning into his shoulder, laughing at some dumb joke, and he was looking at her like she was a miracle he didn't deserve. For the first time in our years of friendship, I thought, this one's real. They moved in together within a year. I helped them paint their new apartment, pale blue walls, her choice, and remember thinking how natural it all felt. Saturday mornings, the three of us would drink coffee in their kitchen. Daniel making bad pancakes, Lily teasing him about burning everything. They were messy and domestic and completely ordinary. It made me weirdly happy. Like maybe good people really did find each other. Then he started texting late. At first it was harmless. I'd catch glimpses of his phone lighting up while we were watching TV, names I didn't recognize. He'd laugh at messages he didn't share. I didn't think much of it. But one night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to use the bathroom and saw the light from his room spilling into the hallway. He was sitting at his desk, shirtless, on a video call with someone. I heard him whisper, "I can't talk long. She's asleep." I froze. Not because I was shocked, but because I wasn't. Somewhere deep down, I think I'd been expecting it. He hung up, didn't notice me, and went to bed like nothing happened. I told myself it wasn't my business. People make mistakes. Relationships are complicated. Maybe he'd already ended it. Maybe she'd never find out. Maybe it wasn't even what it looked like. That's what I told myself every time I saw the signs. The sudden trips for work. The second phone number he swore was just for clients. The way he'd glance toward the door before answering a text. One night we were at a bar. He was drunk, really drunk, and I was the only one sober enough to walk him home. We sat on the curb outside their building, the city breathing around us, and out of nowhere he said, "I don't love her anymore." Just like that. No guilt, no hesitation. I asked him why he stayed, and he said, "Because she loves me too much to leave." Then he laughed, this quiet, sad little laugh, and added, "And I'm too much of a coward to be the one who breaks her heart?" That's when I realized I wasn't going to say anything. Not because I agreed with him, God no, but because I saw how broken he already was. He didn't need me to judge him. He needed me to keep pretending he was still a good man, at least in front of someone. And that's exactly what I did. Months passed. Lily kept inviting me over. We'd sit on the couch, drink wine, watch terrible TV, and she'd talk about Daniel with this open, glowing affection that made me want to sink into the floor. She'd ask if he seemed tired lately, if work was stressing him out, if maybe she should plan a getaway for them. I'd smile, nod, say he'd love that. The lies came easy. Too easy. I thought maybe he'd eventually end it cleanly, that it would be a quiet breakup instead of an explosion. But of course, it didn't end quietly. It never does. One night, she found his other phone in the laundry basket. He'd forgotten to hide it. She called me an hour later, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. She asked if I'd known. I opened my mouth, and for a second, I almost said no. Almost. But she was my friend too. She'd become family. I couldn't lie to her anymore. So I told the truth. Not all of it, but enough. She hung up on me halfway through. I didn't hear from either of them for weeks. When I finally did, Daniel showed up at my place with a duffel bag and eyes that looked 10 years older. He didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't cry, didn't make excuses. He just said, "You told her." I said, "Yeah." He nodded once, sat down and said, "Good." Then he slept on my couch for 2 nights, left before dawn on the 3rd, and I haven't seen him since. Lily moved away a few months later. She sent me one text before she did. "Thank you for finally being honest. Take care of yourself." I didn't reply. I didn't know how. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that blue apartment and how it must have smelled. Pancakes and coffee, maybe the faint trace of her perfume on the curtains. I think about how easy it is to do nothing and call it kindness. How silence can feel like loyalty, until you realize it's just cowardice in disguise. I used to believe that being a good friend meant standing by someone no matter what. Now I think it means knowing when to walk away, even if it leaves you standing alone. And sometimes, when I pass that street, I still look up at their old balcony, half expecting to see them there. Her laughing, him pretending everything's fine. And I remember that not all ghosts are people. Some are just moments we were too afraid to interrupt. And that's where we'll leave things tonight. If you've been through something like these stories, if you've ever had your trust shaken, or felt that quiet kind of heartbreak that doesn't explode but just fades, I hope you know you're not alone. Everyone's got their own version of loss, their own story about something that could have gone differently if only the truth had come a little sooner. Sometimes love ends softly. Sometimes it ends loud. But either way, it always teaches us something about who we are, what we deserve, and how strong we can be when the ground shifts beneath us. If you're listening to this while you're winding down for the night, I hope you're able to let your shoulders drop, take a slow breath, and remember that healing doesn't happen all at once. It comes back in pieces, in the small things, the good mornings, the deep breaths, the days that don't hurt quite as much as they used to. Thank you for spending this time here, in this quiet corner of the internet, for listening, for caring, for being the kind of person who stays curious about other people's stories. Wherever you are, in bed, in the dark, on a late drive home, I hope you rest easy tonight. You're doing better than you think. I'll see you in the next one. Good night.